Hello everyone. So today we're going to do functions part 2. So we're going to focus on value returning functions. So if you remember last lecture, we focused on void functions. Before we dive into value returning functions, I wanted to do a little bit of a review on what we've been discussing on passing arguments to functions. So here is an example of just some piece of code. So we have a function called sum function, and it takes in one argument, num, and it just checks if num is equal to 5, it's going to print this is a 5, else it's going to print this is not a 5. And in our main, we have input for n, and then we pass that n into sum function. Now, the thing that I want to highlight here, and this is also in your textbook, Gaddis, is that the variable n, so let me highlight it here, the variable, actually, sorry, the variable n here is going to point to the same value, and this n here, these are the same, is going to point to the same value as this num here, but they are different variables. So you can see here there's a diagram, there's n and it points to the value 5, and there's the variable num and it also points to the value 5. And both of these things could have had the same name. Like n could have been called num, and then we would have just had two variables called num. So let's have a look in PyThuTutor Visualize. So go ahead and open that up, and let's copy in this code and see how this works. Okay. So we're going to visualize. So we start in our main, and it asks for input for n. So let's say 5. So there in our main, we have this local variable n with the value 5 that I just inputted. Then it's going to call some function and pass in n. And you can see as soon as we do that, then here we have for some function a local variable num that also has the value 5. So then I go to the next line. So if num is equal to 5, which it is, then we're going to print this is a 5. And then we're going to stop here, and this is it's going to return none because it's a void function. And when we exit out of there, we lose the num, we come back here, and we exit out of there, we lose the n, and we're finished. Now, if I edit this code, and I also call this num, I want to demonstrate that to you. So then I'm going to start, I ask for some input for num, let's say 4 this time. So now num has a value 4, and then we go to the next one, and in here you see now we have a new num. So this is what I mean is there are two different variables. So I just want to make sure that's clear for everyone. So you don't have to name them the same thing, and if you do name them the same thing, they're not the same variable. They're two local variables belonging to two different functions. And then we go through, it's not 5, so we print this is not a 5, and then we exit out. Okay, so just want to make sure that, and you can read about this more in your book chapter as well, but I just wanted to make sure that that is clear. I also wanted to talk about making changes to parameters, and here this is also from your book chapter, so let's have a look at this. So here is a function which you can copy and paste into Sublime if you wish. So you can see here we start with value equals 99, then we print that, then we call the change me function, and then we pass an argument, which is the value 99. Then we print I am changing the value, and then we change it to 0, and we say now the value is, and we print that. And then we come back and we say back in the main the value is, and then we're going to see what this value is. Is it going to be 99 or is it going to be 0? And you can have a think about this and maybe pause the video if you wish. And let's go back here and have a look. And let's see. Okay, so we start with the value 99. Then we print this is 99. Then we get to the function called change me. So then you can see it gets passed in this value variable. And then we have this new variable arg, which is given the value 99. Then we're going to print I am changing the value. And then we change arg to 0, right? Like this. So you can see that although arg has been changed to 0, value, which was created here in the main, is still at 99. Then we're going to print arg, so that's going to be 0. Then we exit out of that, and you know that was a local variable, so arg has now disappeared. So we're just still with value. So I think you know what's going to happen here. We're going to print back in the main, the value is 99. And then we exit out. So it's just important for you to know what's happening there and why that is the way it is. So we have two variables pointing to two different things in memory at that point. Okay. So this is just saying, have a look at Python Tutor Visualize. And then we did this both in the recorded lecture and in class, but just a recap that a local variable is defined within a function and it lives and dies within that function. It's not accessible outside. Global variable is created outside of a function. And if you want to change it inside of a function, you use this global keyword. But if you just want to access it, you can just access it like this. Okay. So let us go to value returning functions. So last lesson, you learned about void functions. A void function is just a group of statements that perform a specific task. A value returning function actually returns a value back to the part of the program that calls it. So, you know, with void functions, you were just saying like print or something like that. But in a value returning function, you actually have to return something. And the value that is returned can be assigned or has to be assigned to a variable, which is displayed on the screen or used in a mathematical expression. Okay, so what does that mean? So what we mean by that is that you have a variable in front of the function call. So remember, so we're actually going to do this one in a bit, but when we're using input, for example, we have to assign that input to something, right? When you say, what is your age? You have a variable called age. When you say, what is your name? You have a variable called name. And that's really, really key, really, really important. So please don't forget that. Okay. The other thing is that it ends with a return statement. So you have the same kind of function definition, have a whole bunch of stuff, but then at the end, you're going to return something. So this something is going to be returned back to where this function was called. And after you have the return keyword, the function will end. If you try to print something after return or see something else or do something else, it will not work. And you should try it and see for yourself. It will just end at the return. And you can, I'm going to put this underneath here, and you can return things like of any kind of data type. You can return an integer, a float, a string, a boolean. You can return multiple values, but we're not going to be covering that right now. So I want you to have a look and study this comparison of these two functions. So this is the add function that you know, or sum here. And here is the old void way that we learnt last time. So we have this function definition sum, it takes in 2 arguments, and we have a local variable total, which adds the 2. And then we just say print total is, and then when we call it, we just say sum 2, 3. Now in a value returning method, we have those two, and then we don't print like we did here. We say return total. We go to the main, and then we call here, we call the function sum, but we assign it to a variable. Here it's called result. And then we can print that here. That should be result. I changed that last minute so it'd be clearer for you. So there you go. Okay. So let's have a look and see what happens. So let's copy this. Let's go back to Python Tutor Visualize. All right, so here we are. Oh, if you copied it, you have to be careful of your quotation marks. Okay, nice. All right, so here we are, and let's begin. There we go. So we start with our main, and come down here, and it's going to say, okay, result equals sum 2, 3. So we're calling the function call. That's going to take us up to the function definition. And it's, as you can see, it's passed in 2 and 3 into the arguments num1 and num2. Then we go to this line and we say total equals num1 plus num2. And now here is the new bit. We're going to say return total. So now we actually have a return value, which is 5. Okay. And that 5 gets assigned to this variable result. So I'm going to do that last step again. So when we return our total 5, this, because whatever gets returned out of this is going to get assigned to result gets the value 5. And these variables have disappeared because they're local, and we've exited that function. So now we're back in the main, result is equal to 5, and then we're going to just go and print the result. And that's it. So whatever we do, we have to return something, and then we have to assign what we returned in the function call. Okay. Now, every year I make this slide bolder and bigger. So this is the #1 mistake that students make, is they don't assign something when they're calling the value returning function. So for example, they'll go here and they'll do that. And if you do that, you will lose it. So let me show you what I mean by that. So go here, we do all of this, we come here, we have the 5, return value 5. Okay, what happened? We came to the main, it wasn't assigned, there was no result equals here. We go to the next one, and then it will say result is not defined. And that is because we didn't assign this to a variable. So don't do that. #1 mistake when students are working with value returning functions. So whenever you call a value returning function, assign it to a variable like this, or when we were using user input, or when we're trying to find a random number. Okay. And then you can return, if you want, you can use a local variable and return that, or you could just say, you know, return num1 plus num2. The other thing that you can do is you can put the function calls inside of an expression. But, you know, I wouldn't worry about that too much because this might confuse you, because here you don't then need to assign it to a variable, but it's just an example for you there. I wouldn't worry about that too much. Now, remember when we said you can return a data type like true or false, a Boolean. So it could be a task that returns true if it's successful and false if it's unsuccessful. So let's try this, and I really hope you do try it, because otherwise it'd be more challenging to learn. But if you could try to rewrite your even or odd function, you can call it isEven, takes in an argument, but have it so that it's a value returning function and it returns true or false, depending on whether it's even or odd. And then call isEven in your main and print the result. So I'm really hoping that you pause your video here and try to do that, and I'll just get on and assume that you've done that. Okay. So let's have a look. And let's pull this up in Sublime here. So here we go. So we have isEven takes in an argument n. We check if it's even. If it is, we say return true. Else we say return false. In the main, we take in the input, and then we assign the value to a variable and we call it, passing in the input, and then we print the result. So let's have a look. Let's copy this. Let's go back here. Okay, so we start in our main. It's going to ask us for input. Let's say 7. So there num is equal to 7. Then we're going to go to our function call, and it's going to pass in the 7. So n is going to be assigned 7 as well. Then we check if it's even. It is not. So we're going to return false. And you can see the return value is going to be false. And that needs to be assigned to something. So we're going to assign it to result. So now you can see result is false, and then we just print false. So please make sure you step through that and that that's clear for you before moving on. As you know, we have built-in functions in Python. So print, input, range, int, these are all things that you have been using. Now you can also import modules that have variables or functions that you can use. And we're actually going to be using one of those in your lab today. And we're going to use randint. So with those, you need to put in a statement at the top to import the library. So for example, you're going to need to say import random at the top of your code. And then when you want to create a random number, you can say, okay, number equals, and then you call random, because that's the library here, import random, dot, and then the built-in function, randint, and then you give it 2 arguments. So say here you want to create a random number between 1 and 20, you can pass in 1 and 20, and these are both inclusive. If you wanted to, for example, use pi, you could use import math, the math library, and you could say area equals, and then you could say math.pi to access the variable. But we're not going to use that today. We're going to use this function randint. So you want to be able to import random at the top, and then use this line to create a random number. Okay. This is not super important at this level, but just so you know, functions have like a function signature that defines, its input, its output, the number of parameters it takes, their types, and a return value and type. And we've actually seen this before. So for example, you've worked with the function range where it's taken 1, 2, or 3 arguments. And so each of those are different functions with their own signature. And then this, you really don't need to worry about at this point. It's just that in the future, you can actually create your own libraries, but we wouldn't really get to this till we looked at object-oriented programming. But this is something that you can do. You can create your own modules in Python and import them as well.